How's it going, guys? This is some election history over the 1976 election between Gerald Ford, the incumbent president, and Jimmy Carter, the Southern Democrat from Georgia. Let's do a little bit of background information on the two real quick. Gerald Ford is the current president. He was put into president when he became the vice president. When Vice President Agnew, Nixon's vice president and running mate, resigned on October 10th, 1973. Ford was nominated, and then when President Nixon resigned on August 9th, 1974, because of the Watergate scandal, Ford was basically given the presidency because he wasn't elected on a ticket of either vice president or president. He's the first president that ever happened to, so that's kind of unusual. And then Carter, he's a Southern Democrat from Georgia and the governor of Georgia from January 12, 1971 to January 14, 1975. And he's very popular in the South, as I will show you in a second. But Ford's biggest problems is going to be inflation. Carter really rips Ford on that because inflation's running at about 5% at the time of the election, maybe 6 or 7%. Even though Carter obviously accelerates that big time towards his term, he rips Ford for causing that, and that's kind of unusual because generally politicians aren't blamed for high inflation in today's times. But Ford was really had a problem to explain with that, and Carter really used that to his advantage. And also, Carter was able to portray Ford as connected to the Watergate scandal, even though it really wasn't the case because Ford didn't really have connections to the Nixon administration much. But he was blamed a lot for it, and then it obviously worked because Ford lost the election. But here's the electoral map, and as you can see, it's very unusual. It's more like Carter won more what you'd expect a Republican to win, with the exception of New York and Massachusetts. And Ford won a lot of states that you'd normally expect a Democrat to win, like California, Oregon, Washington, Nevada, Illinois, and then Michigan, obviously. So Ford's from Michigan, obviously, so he's going to get his home state like most politicians do. He gets the upper Northeast, that's very Republican territory at this time. Vermont, New Hampshire, and Maine, very Republican up until about 1992 when Clinton changes that. Connecticut's kind of weird. That was not really supposed to be won by Ford. That's more Democrat territory even at this time. But Ford gets it either way. And then New Jersey, it's kind of like Vermont, New Hampshire, and Maine. It's traditionally Democrat now, but back then it was more Republican turf. And then Virginia, obviously, it's very Republican turf. And then the Pacific, California, very Republican from 52 to 92, so Ford gets that, no questions. And then all these other states, New Mexico, all the Pacific land, that's generally Republican territory throughout history, with the exception of New Mexico and Nevada. But this is very different because basically Carter, he's a Democrat, and he's put into the office by the South, which that's normally who keeps Democrats out of office in modern times, and he gets into office, so very strange occurrence there. And then but the two big swing states in this election are going to be Texas and New York, that being that they were the most contested since they had the high electoral value. Ohio is very contested as well, even though I think Carter was expected to get it. It's actually kind of random how close it was. As you can see, it was only a difference of about 0.30%. But Texas and New York are the highly contested. New York especially because from 1972 and on until about 1992, it's a swing state, and that's unusual because it's very Democratic throughout history, and it's normally a very one-sided state. And as is Texas, it's normally very Republican or very Democrat up to this point. It's not generally a swing state. This is really the only election that it is a swing state in. And it's also because it only went Republican 4 times in 1928, 1952, 1956, and 1972, and the polls all indicated that it was going to be won by those guys. It was won by Hoover in 28, and Eisenhower 52 and 56, and Nixon in 72. Again, it was known that it was going to be won by those guys, and then it's obviously very Democrat turf up until 1980 when Reagan changes that, and then New York's also very, very contested because had Ford won it, he would have been the president. He would have won another term in office, but he did not win it, so Carter gets the presidency because of New York primarily. And then, as you can see, New York very close, 4.5%, as was Texas, and 3.17%. But Carter gets basically all his support from the South. He wins Pennsylvania, New York, Massachusetts. Massachusetts very, very Democratic throughout history, as it is now, very liberal. He gets Wisconsin, Minnesota. That's a big win for him. Minnesota, because of his vice presidential candidate, Walter Mondale. He's from Minnesota. And then he gets Wisconsin, I guess, just because it's in that area with Minnesota. I don't really know why you would think that it'd go Ford, because Ford did so well along the Great Lakes region in that area, but he still gets it either way. So, and this is also significant because this is the last time that you see a Democrat win a lot of southern states. Bill Clinton gets a couple. He wins Arkansas, Louisiana, Tennessee, Kentucky, and then Florida. And that's about it. Democrats after this election really don't win much of the South. And Carter just dominates it, with the exception of Virginia. And also, West Virginia at this time, even though it's incredibly Republican in modern times, it's very Democratic up until 2000 when Bush changes that. So that's kind of an interesting fact. And then this is also... from this point on, since Mondale wins Minnesota, since Carter wins Minnesota, from this point on, Minnesota is Democrat. Like, it doesn't go back Republican, even though you have 5 Republican presidents. Even though the Republicans win 5 elections after this, 3 of them are blowouts, with the 2 Reagan blowouts and then the Bush Sr. blowout of '88. It still stays Democrat, so that's kind of interesting. It's the only state that stays Democrat for all the rest of the elections from this point to 2012, so that's kind of an interesting fact. And then let's look at the swing states real quick in this election, though. A lot of states that aren't generally swing states in most elections are swing states, like Oklahoma, very, very Republican, one-sided Republican. It's very close. Ford just wins it by 1.21%. Virginia, very Republican up until 2008, only won by Ford by a little bit. Iowa, Maine's very Republican at this time, only won by about 0.8%. Iowa, that's always just been a swing state, so it's not surprised that was close. Ohio, obviously not surprised it was close, very big swing state. Oregon's kind of close. It's been a swing state for a while. California is unusually close because up until '92, when Clinton changes things, it's very Republican, and it's won by Republicans by generally 6% or above. So it's very close considering how Republican it generally is. And then New Jersey's also very close. As I said before, it's very Republican turf, and Ford wins it by just barely. So kind of interesting. And then we go back, and then you can see Ford won the popular vote by a reasonable amount, 1,700,000, about 2% ahead. But he narrowly wins the election with 297 electoral votes to 240. Again, as I said, only one state could have changed this, and that would have been New York. Or if Ford had won Ohio and Texas, he would have also won the election, so it could have been decided very easily had Ford done a little bit better in those 2 states. And then basically how Ford lost, it's going to be inflation and the Watergate scandal that are going to be big in this election. Since Nixon was obviously very unpopular due to the Watergate, Ford's kind of connected to that. Carter is able to connect him pretty well to that and get that conspiracy that he's corrupt like Nixon was, and then you don't want to re-elect him. And then the inflation rate, obviously, it's 5%, which that's actually very high. And then Carter's able to make a big deal about how that's bad for Ford and you shouldn't reelect him because inflation's too high. Elect me because I'm going to fix it and